If I asked you what made up your body, I'm sure most of you would tell me that most of your body is made up of water. By that fact alone, I think we know that water is extremely important. Also, Earth is able to support life because of the water that is on it. We have not yet found another planet that has sufficient water resources to support life. So, inherently, we know that water is important to us and important to all life on Earth. So in this module, you're going to learn about the importance of water, how humans affect water and environmental problems that causes, and solutions to those problems. The first concept related to water that we're going to talk about is that water on Earth is limited. The same amount of water that exists today is the amount that has existed and been available to living things for all of Earth's history. So we're not getting more water. We're stuck with what we have. So water is limited. The other thing that makes water even more limited is that for us and our livestock and our crops, the only water that we can use is fresh water. Now, that is actually only 2.5% of Earth's water, of all of Earth's water, is fresh water. So that's represented over here on the right as this second tiny little sphere that you maybe didn't notice. The first sphere is all of water on Earth if you were to put it into a sphere and compare it to the size of the Earth. So this is all water, fresh and salt. This one is all fresh water. So 2.5% of Earth's water is fresh water. Of that fresh water, 30.3% is available for humans to use. So 30.3%, and we see that down here, is in groundwater with only 0.3%. So 30% is in groundwater with only 0.3% in lakes and rivers, which is where most of the water that we use comes from, that surface fresh water. So if we take 30.3% of 2.5%, that leaves us with less than 1% of all of the water on Earth is available for use for humans. Added to that, so this is, I'm basically just outlining why there are water issues across the globe. Fresh water is not evenly distributed across the globe, and it's not even evenly distributed to where with population sizes. So this is showing us, if we look in the blues, are where we have the most water per capita. That means per person. So areas in blue have the most fresh water available to each person. And then if we go to the yellow and then this kind of pale peach color, we see the areas that have less than 2,000 cubic meters of fresh water per person. So they have water scarcity. So if you took a look at population sizes, especially considering that China and India are our most populous nations, and then we have Indonesia, which is kind of in the middle. But China and India have very large population sizes, and yet do not have a lot of fresh water available to those people. So fresh water is limited on Earth, and it's not equally distributed across the Earth. Another thing that you need to know about water is that it is renewable. It is a renewable resource if it's used appropriately. Water, as you learned way back at the beginning of the semester, is a naturally recycled resource. It's recycled through the water cycle that we see over here on the right. And just to remind you, processes in the water cycle include evaporation, evapotranspiration, so transpiration is water coming from plants. We have precipitation here, we have runoff, and we have groundwater and percolation. So just to kind of remind you of the water cycle. So through the water cycle, water is recycled and that's why we have all of the same water that we've ever used and can continue to reuse that. Now with human use, water can be used in two different ways. Water use can be consumptive, and in that case, it's non-renewable, and I'll describe that a little bit later on. Or human water use can be non-consumptive, which is renewable, and we're going to talk about that coming up on the next slide. So non-consumptive water use occurs When water is removed from the source, so over here I have Lake Erie highlighted. So water is, in our area, water would be removed from Lake Erie. And then once it's used, it's returned to that same watershed, which means it eventually would get back to Lake Erie. So the watershed is actually, on this image, the watershed for Lake Erie is highlighted in the bright green, the darker green. So what that says is any water that goes into any of the streams in this whole watershed will eventually get back to Lake Erie. So as long as water is returned to one of those sources, it will get back to Lake Erie. So that's non-consumptive use because it's coming from Lake Erie and it eventually gets back to Lake Erie. Now we're going to talk about this concept though, is that this is non-consumptive, which means it is renewable, but keep in mind what happens to that water as you use it before it gets back out into the lake. And I'll explain that a little bit further later. Okay, so one thing we need to take a look at is how water gets to you and then gets back out to Lake Erie. I think we tend to take this for granted, and a lot of people don't really know where their water comes from. So first of all, water is pumped out of a local freshwater source. For those of us living in Erie, that is Lake Erie. But if you don't live next to a Great Lake, it might be a smaller lake. Or if you don't live near any lakes, it could be a stream or a river. And then if those are not readily available, it could come from groundwater. So any source of fresh water, and the sources that are on the surface like lakes, streams, and rivers are the best sources, the easiest sources to get fresh water from. That water is pumped out of the local freshwater source by a treatment plant. So water comes in, this is the Erie Water Works. So water is pumped into their facilities from Lake Erie. It's filtered to take out any sediment or large, maybe insects or even bacteria can be filtered out now. So it's filtered and then treated. One of the things they treat it with is fluorine, and another is a type of chlorine in order to, again, kill the bacteria. And then that water, once it's been treated and is now deemed safe, it gets stored in water towers or reservoirs. This is a big reservoir in California, not one in Erie, so that there's enough water to be used by surrounding homes and businesses. So from that stored water, then, your home and other businesses and industries and everything will be supplied. So this just shows the home being supplied. So this includes your drinking water, it includes the water used to flush the toilet, to wash your hands, to take a shower, all of those things. Then once you send that down the drain, that water goes to a wastewater treatment plant. Again, this is the one in Erie. And at a wastewater treatment plant, there are many processes that are used, several steps that go into cleaning water before it then gets returned back out to the local source of fresh water, in this case, Lake Erie. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is that water that goes down your drains will get to the wastewater treatment plant. Water that goes down a drain that's in the streets, depending on the municipality, but in most municipalities, that water actually just goes right into a stream. It doesn't go through the wastewater treatment plant. And the reason for that is that there's so much water that would be coming into those drains that it would totally overwhelm a wastewater treatment facility during a rain event. So water that goes down the drain generally goes directly back to a local freshwater source. So you need to keep that in mind anytime you maybe decide to dump something or you see someone dumping something into one of those drains, especially if it's a toxic substance like oil or paint. That's going to go directly into the local body of fresh water and will pollute it. Okay, so now we're going to get back to when I said water that gets put back out into the lake is different than the water that was originally brought in. So when you think about when you're in the shower and you're washing your body, all of that soap and all the other products that you use are going down the drain. So the ingredients from all of those products, as well as all of the stuff that you're washing off of your body, is going down the drain. Well, wastewater treatment plants are there to clean water so that it doesn't cause disease. They're specifically there to kill mostly bacteria. Wastewater treatment plants were not created to filter out a lot of these ingredients. In fact, when most of those wastewater treatment plants were built, we didn't even have many of the ingredients that are in our products now. So we're at a point where our technology now allows us to test water for things that are in very minute amounts. So because we're able to test water for small, very, very small amounts, we're talking parts per trillion, we're able to test chemicals in the water. So, for example, ingredients from personal care products have been found in the water. Again, these are in parts per trillion. Most likely they definitely will not cause immediate health effects on humans, which is probably why you don't hear about them and probably why they haven't caused too big of a stink. But over time, prolonged interaction with those tiny amounts could cause effects. We just don't know what they might be, or if they even do cause effects. We've also been able to detect byproducts of pharmaceuticals, things like antibiotics, things like birth control pills, things like Prozac. We have been able to detect very small amounts of those ingredients and those pharmaceuticals in our bodies of water. Again, these are in parts per trillion. The dosage is not enough to affect you in any way immediately. But again, we don't know about the effects of long-term exposure. Other things from our products that get into water include microbeads, which are tiny pieces of plastic that often are in your in face wash. So if you have like an exfoliating face wash, those tiny little pieces may actually be microbeads, which are plastic. And those are tiny enough that depending on the incoming water treatment plant, they may still come into our water, although their effects are probably more seen in the environment. Another thing that has been discovered is tiny little polyester fibers in the water. These are coming from washing those fleece clothing items that you have. And that comes out in your washing machine and gets out. The wastewater treatment plant does not take all of that out. Again, because they were built before those even existed. We didn't even know that they were there until probably a few years ago. So we're finding polyester fibers out in the water, and a lot of them. So as far as the effects of this, with human effects, again, we know that these are in small enough amounts that they won't cause immediate harm to humans. But we don't know about the long-term effects, or if there even would be any. The other thing, some things that we do know though, are environmental effects. These are easier to test. So one of the things that has been very well documented in several places across the globe is feminization of male fish. So this figure is from a research paper from that. So over here we see a normal female. It's a tissue sample of the ovaries. So we see oocytes. These are developing eggs. Next to that we see normal male testes tissue. Then down on the bottom we see a feminized male tissue from its testes. So here we have testicular tissue, which is the normal tissue that should be there. But we also see developing oocytes or eggs in that male testy. That's what we mean by feminization of fish. This certainly does affect their ability to reproduce. And the scientific literature very clearly shows that this is due to compounds, pharmaceuticals found that are getting into the water after they've gone through wastewater treatment plants. So this is due to human products, probably largely due to birth control. There are other effects that have been documented in the environment on other organisms as well. So these, and these are continuing to develop as well. So we definitely know that there are environmental effects on human substances found in the water.